The moment the FBI agents kicked in the apartment door, they were not arresting a stranger. They were stopping a man they already knew. He had served time, he had been released, he had shaken hands with officers and promised to start fresh. But now, in the quiet hours before dawn, he was caught again, this time with ISIS propaganda, attack notes, and messages praising mass murder. The danger was no longer behind bars. It was free, moving, and watching. And the question haunting investigators was chilling. How many others like him were already out there? Just hours earlier, the man had been sitting alone, staring at his phone. He had no uniform now, no prison number, no locked cell door. He was supposed to be rebuilding his life. Instead, he was planning violence, inspired by an extremist path that began years earlier inside a federal prison. Authorities later confirmed what they feared most. His radical beliefs were not new. They were planted while he was locked up, and he was not the only one. As the agents secured the room, one officer whispered a phrase that would later appear in official reports: sleeper after release. That term would soon become a warning across the country. But this arrest was only the surface of a much deeper story. Years before this moment, the man had entered prison for a non-terror offense. He was angry, lost, and searching for purpose. Like many inmates, he felt invisible. Prison can break people. It can also reshape them. Inside those walls, extremist recruiters look for exactly that kind of person: quiet, isolated, easily influenced. In several real federal cases across the United States, ISIS-linked inmates used their time behind bars to spread ideology. They shared videos, stories of war, and twisted promises of honor and brotherhood. They spoke softly, often during prayer times or recreation hours, staying away from guards. They told new inmates that America hated them, that violence was justice, and that dying for ISIS was a ticket to meaning. One of the most dangerous cases came from California, where Jamiat-ul-Islam is-Sahih, known as JIS, was formed inside state prison walls. Its leader recruited inmates who later walked free. Those men did not leave their beliefs behind. After release, they planned attacks on military bases and Jewish targets. The plot was stopped just days before bloodshed. That case shocked law enforcement and changed how prisons were monitored. Federal officials began to notice a pattern. Radicalization inside prison did not always end at release. For some, release was the beginning. Back in the present case, investigators found handwritten notes listing public targets. There were no dates yet, but the intent was clear. The man believed he was following ISIS orders, even though the group had never spoken directly to him. That is how modern terror works: lone actors, sleeper beliefs, silent planning. Authorities later said the suspect had been under quiet surveillance since his release. He attended required meetings, he avoided trouble. On the surface, he followed every rule. But online, he praised attacks, he shared extremist content, and slowly he moved from belief to preparation. This is the danger officials fear most. Not loud extremists, not angry protesters, but calm men who blend in, waiting. Across the United States, federal agencies now track dozens of similar cases. Some former inmates were arrested just weeks after release. Others lasted months or even years before acting. In each case, prison was not the end of their story. It was the training ground. Correctional officers have testified that extremist inmates often test boundaries slowly. First, they talk, then they teach, then they select. Those chosen are told to stay quiet once free. No flags, no threats, just patience. The man arrested that night never made it to an attack, but investigators admitted something unsettling. He was closer than they were comfortable admitting. As dawn broke and the suspect was led away in cuffs once again, one agent looked at the growing list of names on his file. Former inmates, monitored releases, open investigations. The list was longer than the public knew. And as the prison gates across the country opened that same morning, releasing hundreds of inmates back into society, one question remained unanswered. how many sleepers had already walked free and who would wake up next. The danger did not begin at the apartment door. It began years earlier, behind steel bars, where time moves slowly and anger grows fast. Inside federal prisons across the United States, extremist inmates are often mixed into the general population. Officials try to separate them, but space is limited and ideology doesn't need much room to spread. In quiet corners of prison yards, libraries, and prayer rooms, conversations begin. Not loud, not violent, just words. In several real investigations, FBI records showed that ISIS-inspired inmates carefully chose who to talk to. They looked for men who felt forgotten, men serving long sentences, men who felt betrayed by the system. These recruiters did not talk about bombs right away. They talked about pain, about injustice, about brotherhood. Only later did the message turn darker. One former inmate told investigators that the first time ISIS was mentioned, it sounded like a story, not a plan. A story of strength, a story of fighting back. Over time, those stories became lessons. Videos were described, attacks were praised, death was called honor. In Texas, one convicted extremist continued recruiting while already serving time for terrorism-related charges. He passed handwritten notes, explained ISIS ideology, and encouraged other inmates to prepare for action after release. He told them prison was only a pause. The real mission would begin outside. Federal prosecutors later confirmed that several inmates exposed to his teachings stayed under watch long after their release. Some were arrested again for attempting to provide support to ISIS. Others were caught trying to travel overseas. A few were stopped just days before acting. This is where the idea of sleepers after release became real. Law enforcement learned that prison radicalization often doesn't end with violence inside the facility. It ends with silence. Once released, these individuals are told to blend in, get a job, avoid trouble, wait. They are not ordered to act right away. They are told to live normal lives until the moment feels right. In one real case from the Midwest, a man released from federal custody was under supervised release. He checked in on time, he followed the rules, but online he praised ISIS attacks, he shared extremist content, and slowly he moved from belief to preparation. This is the danger officials fear most. Not loud extremists, not angry protesters, but calm men who blend in, waiting. Across the United States, federal agencies now track dozens of similar cases. Some former inmates were arrested just weeks after release. Others lasted months or even years before acting. In each case, prison was not the end of their story. It was the training ground. Correctional officers have testified that extremist inmates often test boundaries slowly. First, they talk, then they teach, then they select. Those chosen are told to stay quiet once free. No flags, no threats, just patience. The man arrested that night never made it to an attack, but investigators admitted something unsettling. He was closer than they were comfortable admitting. As dawn broke and the suspect was led away in cuffs once again, one agent looked at the growing list of names on his file. Former inmates, monitored releases, open investigations. The list was longer than the public knew. And as the prison gates across the country opened that same morning, releasing hundreds of inmates back into society, one question remained unanswered. How many sleepers had already walked free, and who would wake up next? The danger did not begin at the apartment door. It began years earlier, behind steel bars, where time moves slowly and anger grows fast. Inside federal prisons across the United States, extremist inmates are often mixed into the general population. Officials try to separate them, but space is limited and ideology doesn't need much room to spread. In quiet corners of prison yards, libraries, and prayer rooms, conversations began. Not loud, not violent, just words. In several real investigations,
FBI records showed that ISIS-inspired inmates carefully chose who to talk to. They looked for men who felt forgotten, men serving long sentences, men who felt betrayed by the system. These recruiters did not talk about bombs right away. They talked about pain, about injustice, about brotherhood. Only later did the message turn darker. One former inmate told investigators that the first time ISIS was mentioned, it sounded like a story, not a plan. A story of strength, a story of fighting back. Over time, those stories became lessons. Videos were described, attacks were praised, death was called honor. In Texas, one convicted extremist continued recruiting while already serving time for terrorism-related charges. He passed handwritten notes, explained ISIS ideology, and encouraged other inmates to prepare for action after release.
He told them prison was only a pause. The real mission would begin outside. Federal prosecutors later confirmed that several inmates exposed to his teachings stayed under watch long after their release. Some were arrested again for attempting to provide support to ISIS. Others were caught trying to travel overseas. A few were stopped just days before acting. This is where the idea of sleepers after release became real. Law enforcement learned that prison radicalization often does not end with violence inside the facility. It ends with silence. Once released, these individuals are told to blend in, get a job, avoid trouble, wait. They are not ordered to act right away. They are told to live normal lives until the moment feels right. In one real case from the Midwest, a man released from federal custody was under supervised release. He checked in on time, he followed the rules, but online he praised ISIS attacks and spoke about becoming a martyr. He had been influenced while incarcerated, learning extremist beliefs from another inmate who never left prison. Agents monitoring him noticed a shift. He stopped posting publicly. He began sending private messages. That silence raised alarms. Authorities say this stage is the most dangerous. There are no threats, no weapons yet, just intent growing in the dark. To respond, federal agencies created special monitoring systems. Former terror-linked inmates are placed under watch, sometimes for years. Their online activity is reviewed, their contacts are tracked. But even with these measures, officials admit they cannot watch everyone all the time. That is what keeps them up at night. One FBI supervisor later stated that the biggest risk is not organized cells, but individuals acting alone, inspired by what they learned behind bars. These men often believe they are soldiers without uniforms. They don't need orders. They believe the message itself is the command. Back in the case that opened this story, investigators pieced together the timeline. The suspect had first shown signs of radical thinking in prison. He attended group discussions led by an inmate later identified as an ISIS sympathizer. After release, the beliefs hardened. Friends said he became quiet, withdrawn, focused. He stopped talking about the future. He spoke instead about destiny. When agents searched his phone, they found no direct contact with ISIS leaders. That made the case more disturbing. The ideology alone had been enough. Officials realized that stopping one man was not enough. Each arrest raised another question. Who taught him? Who listened? Who walked free before anyone noticed? Across the country, correctional officers began reviewing old reports. Inmates released years earlier were flagged again. Some were already being watched. Others had vanished into normal life. The system was reacting, but always a step behind. As it ends, the reality becomes clear. Prison doors do not always close the threat. Sometimes they open it. And as federal agents studied their files late into the night, one new alert flashed across their screens. Another former inmate, recently released, suddenly silent. And this time, there was no location yet, no address, no door to kick in, only time running out. The warning came too late. At a federal monitoring center, an analyst stared at a screen that had not changed in hours. A former inmate, recently released, had gone quiet. No messages, no posts, no check-ins beyond the required ones. Silence like that was never good.
In past cases, it meant only one thing: the planning phase was over. Agents moved fast. Phone records were pulled. Old prison contacts were reviewed. Names resurfaced from years earlier, men who had shared cells, prayer rooms, and whispered talks behind bars. The same pattern appeared again. Radical ideas passed quietly in prison, calm behavior after release, then a sudden break from routine. In real cases across the United States, this moment has been the line between prevention and tragedy. One former inmate in the Northeast had followed every rule after release. He worked a simple job. He lived alone. He never missed a meeting. But behind that calm life, he kept the ideology alive. Investigators later confirmed he had memorized extremist material in prison because physical notes were too risky. Once free, he didn't need paper. He already knew the message by heart. Investigators discovered he had begun visiting public places, not to act yet, but to observe. Malls, transit stations, public buildings. This stage is called dry runs. No weapons, no threats, just watching. In another real case, agents stopped a former inmate days before an attack. When questioned, he said something that stayed with investigators. "I was waiting for the right moment. Prison taught me patience." That sentence spread through federal briefings like a warning. Prison, once meant to stop crime, had become a place where time strengthened belief. Correctional officials admit the challenge is enormous. Thousands of inmates are released every year. Only a small number show extremist ties. An even smaller number become real threats, but it only takes one. Inside prisons, recruiters rarely act alone. They test ideas on many people, knowing only a few will listen deeply. Those few become the sleepers, the rest fade away. That is why predicting who will act is so difficult. Federal probation officers now receive special training. They are taught to look for small changes, a sudden break from family, a shift in language, obsession with martyrdom. Even then, nothing is certain. In one case from the West Coast, a former inmate was under watch for over a year. Agents debated whether he was a real threat or just angry. Then, without warning, he tried to reach an overseas contact linked to ISIS. That single message triggered an arrest. Investigators later traced his path back to a prison library where he had spent hours talking with an extremist inmate who never left custody. The recruiter had succeeded without ever stepping outside. That is the hidden danger of sleeper cases. The leader may still be locked up. The student is free. As authorities reviewed decades of cases, a hard truth emerged. Prison walls can block weapons, but they cannot block ideas. Once planted, those ideas travel wherever the inmate goes.
The government responded with tighter controls, communication limits, isolation units, intelligence sharing between prisons and federal agencies. But critics warned that isolation alone could make things worse, pushing vulnerable inmates deeper into extremist thinking. It became a balancing act between security and prevention. Back at the monitoring center, agents finally got a signal. The silent former inmate's phone pinged near a crowded public location. No call, no message, just movement. Teams were dispatched. Streets were closed quietly. No sirens, no panic. If this was stopped, it had to be done silently. When agents approached the suspect, he did not run. He did not resist. He looked calm, almost relieved. Later, during questioning, he admitted everything. He had been waiting since prison, waiting for meaning, waiting for a chance to act. He never carried out the attack, but officials knew the truth. For every case stopped in time, there may be others still unseen. As this chapter closes, one final detail remains unsettling. During the arrest, the suspect mentioned a name, another former inmate, released months earlier. Someone he said was ready. That name was already in the system, but no one knew where he was. And somewhere beyond the prison gates, another sleeper was still awake, waiting for the signal that might never come, or might come tomorrow. The night was silent, but the threat was anything but.
Federal agents had tracked the second former inmate to a small town in the Midwest. He had no criminal record beyond his prior prison sentence. He had blended in perfectly. Nobody noticed him, not the neighbors, not the co-workers, not even his family. And that was exactly how he wanted it. Inside his apartment, investigators found subtle signs of planning, maps of public places, notes with coded words, pieces of information collected from online extremist forums. There were no weapons yet, but the intent was clear. He had learned in prison that patience was part of the plan. Wait, blend in, observe, then strike. This case, like many others, revealed the danger of radicalization inside U.S. prisons. Prison walls could hold inmates physically, but they could not block ideas. Inmates exposed to extremist beliefs often carried them beyond the bars, creating a new challenge for law enforcement. Authorities now had to monitor released prisoners carefully, sometimes for years, to ensure public safety. Officials had learned that early signs could be easy to miss. A new job, a new apartment, even a calm demeanor could hide dangerous intentions. Social media, private messaging, and encrypted apps became the tools for communication, even for those who had learned to be quiet during incarceration. Agents knew they had to act without alerting the suspect. A single mistake could allow him to carry out a deadly plan. In the Midwest case, the operation moved quickly. Teams surrounded the apartment in plain clothes, ready to intervene if needed. The suspect, unaware he was being watched, prepared to leave. The investigation revealed that he had been following others' movements online, planning potential targets based on crowded areas, timing, and security gaps. The arrest was swift and silent. No shots were fired, no one was hurt. But as agents handcuffed him, they realized something chilling. The man's plan was only partially complete. He had communicated with others who had already been released from prison, others who could still be waiting, watching, and planning. In a federal debriefing later that week, officials emphasized the lessons learned. Prison radicalization is not a problem confined to cells and yards. It continues long after release. Monitoring, intelligence, and community awareness are critical to preventing attacks. Each sleeper stopped may be only one of many, and law enforcement must remain vigilant. The final message from this case was clear. The fight does not end at the prison gate. Every release carries the risk of ideas turning into actions. Authorities may stop one person, but the ideology remains, quietly spreading, quietly recruiting, waiting for another opportunity. And as the sun rose over towns across the United States, somewhere, a former inmate smiled quietly to himself, completely unaware that federal agents were already tracking his every move. The cycle was far from over. The sleepers were still out there.